I've never
Literally.
seen our computer do a forecast on the country that basically says it will not exist, and that's Ukraine.
Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
And welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz, and we are sitting down with the esteemed forecaster. I call him the master forecaster, Martin Armstrong, and just completed this book. It's not the final copy. The printer screwed up, but the copies are on the way. So this should suffice. And it's called The World According to Martin Armstrong. Conversations with the Master Forecaster by yours truly, Kerry Lutz. And Martin, I'm really proud of this book because, we all know your milestones. We all know the things that you've accomplished, the calls that you have made, but we put it pretty much from 2011 to current, everything under one cover. In your words, I didn't put anything in your mouth. I summarized, did key points, takeaways for each discussion, but this really is a testament to you and the accuracy of your calls. You're not 1,000%, nobody is, but the big ones like breaking the Swiss peg, like for years you told me that gold was not ready to do anything and it hovered around $1,000. The Dow, the biggest one that I came up with the first time I think I interviewed you, you said Dow 32,000, and I'm like, who is this guy? He's got to be crazy. And then in 2018, you further clarified the call and said the Dow would be hitting 45,000 between 2022 and 2024. So that's 6 years before it happened. Nobody believes this. And then the number of deep state haters on social media, it shocks me. They're all phony accounts saying nasty things about you. They don't know anything. I mean, this book, Martin, needed to be written.
Well, I think that what people need to understand is that there are two ways to do research. One, you start with a theory and then you go and try and cherry pick facts to support what you said. And the other way is you actually just go out to try and understand how something works and you bump into stuff. Those you can't discover what you already know. So like, penicillin, discovered by mistake, etc. What I bumped into shocked me. I mean, because I didn't believe that would be possible. That, okay, fine, I understood there was a business cycle, but I didn't know that it would be actually precise. I mean, right down to the day. I mean, I did a model just, in 22 when the Russia-Ukraine event began. And here it projected a calming period right to the day of May 15th. And that was put out, basically almost 3 years in advance. I mean, how does the peace meeting take place exactly on that day?
Yeah.
It baffles me. This is not my opinion. It's just something that I think others will maybe, explore and more. I mean, often what it is, I think, is that, people are never appreciated during their lifetime. It's always afterwards. Tesla said all he was ever, he tried to help humanity, and all he got in return was insults and humiliation. And it's so true. I mean, you had Bruno, who was burned alive at the stake because he agreed with Copernicus that the Earth went around the sun rather than the other way around. They burned him alive for that. Throughout history, it's always been this sort of reaction to people, I think. And in my case, it's you know back in the 80s, we had a bank in Lebanon, and they found a ledger downstairs with somebody had written down the price of the Lebanese pound every day to mid 1800s. And they asked if we could build a model. I said, sure. They sent it over. We put it in. And the computer came out and said, your country's going to fall apart in 8 days. I thought there was something wrong with the data. I called them. I said, look, something's got to be wrong here. It says your country's going to fall apart in 8 days. And very calmly, they said, well, what currency would you recommend? And I said, well, it said Swiss franc. I said, this is a very strange conversation. 8 days later, the Civil War began. Then we had a client in Saudi Arabia who was a big shipper. And he calls and says, Iraq's going to start attacking shipping in the Gulf tomorrow. What do you think gold's going to do? I said, you tell me a war's going to start tomorrow? Yeah. So I began to realize over time that what the computer was picking up was simply that somebody always knows there's going to be an event, and they move their money in advance. So we became probably really famous with the Russian call. I stood up in June of 98 and I said, look, Russia's going to collapse. I'm going to give it about 30 days. And London Financial Times had snuck in the back room, and then they stick that on the front page. I went, oh my God.
Oh, that's bad.
And that was the long-term capital management crisis and all that stuff. And the SEC ended up using our model, looking for people who bought puts on the airlines a few days before 9/11. But there's always somebody that knows. And even if you look at the Hamas attack, the defense stock started rising about 7 days before. It's very interesting. But I mean, this is not my opinion. And what I bumped into is that there is an order to what may appear to be, chaos. There is no such thing as a random walk, theory.
Mm-hmm.
That's total bullshit. Nothing's random. I learned that basically in high school, the economics class. They'd say, oh, everything's random so we can manipulate it. Then you went to physics class and they said nothing's random. I said, one of you guys is lying, but I want people to understand that, look, I discovered something that I didn't think existed, but it does. All the turning points. You take the 87 crash right to the day, October 19th. That same thing, just calculating out, gives you the exact day of the high in 1998 of July 20th. You go further off, it's the exact day of the low in the stock market in 202. 207, it goes up the exact day of the peak in the Showa real estate index. I mean, they were calling that, on the floor, Armstrong's revenge. It's not coincidence. I mean, so many of these things, even going back in time. I mean, the very day that Hitler becomes chancellor, right on the model date, to the day. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it is, but there's something that is there which shows that if we really understood how the economy works, I think it's more like the biblical story, and maybe that's the lesson of Joseph telling the Pharaoh, There'll be 7 years of drought and 7 years of plenty. So if you understand that there are definitive cycles,
Mhm. So let's
then
bring
you
it.
stockpile your food because you know
Yeah.
it's going to get worse on the other side.
Yeah. So let's bring it to, you made a call actually today about Ukraine, that it's a
Hmm.
turning point here. Are we going to have peace there, or are we going to have world war?
No, I think World War. Um, Putin didn't show up. Uh, you have to judge things not by what you think, but what other people think, um, how they respond. And um, look, they suckered Putin in the first time uh, with the Minsk agreement. Oh,
Hmm.
the Donbass should have a right to vote, Crimea, etc., to separate. They're all Russians there. They've been living there for hundreds of years. Crimea, 15% of the population are Mongol. There are not Ukrainians there, period.
Hmm.
All right. And uh, in 2014, you can look it up, the Odessa massacre. As soon as the revolution took place, what did they do? They went into Odessa and were grabbing any Russian speaking people off the street, killing them. They ran into the trade building and they set it on fire and burned them all alive.
Mm.
You know, the Western press is such a piece of shit. I mean, if that was Ukrainian, oh, that would be the front page. Oh, they're Russians. Who gives a shit? You know, uh, the bias in the press is just so overwhelmingly. All they're doing is beating the war drums and cheering it. I mean, everything, I just saw one
Fanning
this
the flame.
morning. Oh, Putin's a walking, death man. I mean, they act as if they have no clue what they're talking about. Zero. Putin is the most responsible guy, and you replace him, and you're going to get one of their neocons like we have. And then it's full on.
Mm-mm-mm.
The criticism he gets in Russia is that he only went in to protect the Donbass. He should have gone in and actually gone in and taken all of Ukraine like we did to Iraq, and it would have been over in 3 weeks. Shock and all, he didn't want to do that. And
Yeah.
it's, all these people, oh, he's evil, this, really. You don't know Russia. And you expect, you think that you can just bash Russia all the time. And those people, I mean, I know some Russians, and an old friend of mine, I met her in Tokyo when she was a translator back then. So she's not political, but she asked me a question: why does everybody hate us so much? And I said, what can I say? It's just, it's ridiculous. It's because your country used to be communist. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm a little more optimistic, but but there's certainly the possibility for this thing to explode. But if the U.S. doesn't jump on the bandwagon here and lead it, I just don't see Europe getting their act together and actually making this thing explode, because they can't do it without the U.S. As long as Trump holds fast, I guess they can do a false flag, go back to the old bag of tricks, but I certainly wouldn't doubt that. I certainly wouldn't doubt your thesis, Martin. I certainly would.
I also have been talking to people in Romania. They're going to an election on the 18th, and they have woken up. They're very anti-EU. They realize that the EU doesn't give two shits about Ukrainian people. As long as if they all die, fine. As long as they take a Russian with them,
Yeah.
and um,
That's a
you know,
sacrifice that's a risk they're willing to take, right?
yeah, exactly. And they want to do the same thing with Romanians, and they realize that. And that's why they do not want to go to war with Russia, but this is what the EU is pushing. And they're very concerned that they rigged their last election. And he was anti-EU, and most people didn't realize what was at stake. NATO's biggest base was being constructed in Romania, so they could attack Russia. And they feel that their country is going to be destroyed, just like Ukraine. For what? And then you have the Europeans. Oh, if Ukraine falls, he'll come take the rest of Europe. For what?
Yeah.
Europe has nothing. They have no energy, no gold. There's nothing other than, you walk into France and the French are going to say, okay, you're here. Are you going to pay our pensions now? That's it.
Yeah.
The other way around, what I have heard out of Paris, from extremely good sources, is that Macron thinks that just let all the Ukrainians die and Romanians and kill as many Russians as possible, and then they can walk in and take Russia. And then with $75 trillion worth of assets, it'll be twice the size of the U.S. national debt, and Europe will rise to, the pinnacle of the world like the Roman Empire again. And people in government, I can tell you, I have heard them, they call Macron the petite Napoleon.
The resemblance there.
Yeah, and then you have, this latest thing of Coke and everything else.
What's that about?
Well, look, I knew Laura. He was one of my sources in Ukraine. He told me, because it's got to be at least 2 years ago, if not longer, that Zelensky was a cokehead.
Sure looks like it. It sure looks like sniffing. He's rubbing his nose. His eyes are like bulging out of his head. They're glazed. And so, one thing is, like, I think the U.S. or Trump would definitely like to stage a coup in Ukraine and get him out. But there's echoes of Vietnam and Bao Dao. When we did it there, that was like the beginning of the end. And nobody has the guts to do it now. But really, if you ever wanted to stage a coup that would really help things out, that would be the time.
Well, I mean, May 7th last year, the very day our model turned, there was an attempted assassination on Zelensky. Two of his colonels. He then fired his bodyguard. He's now using British, some Americans, I hear, because he doesn't trust Ukrainians. And I speak to some Ukrainians in the military, and they basically say if he was on fire, they wouldn't urinate on him until he was dead.
All right.
He's just he could care less about the people. I mean, he had a peace deal, and Boris Johnson hopped on the plane and said, no, you're not allowed to have peace. So the Ukrainians I speak to, I mean, their country is not being ruled by them. And this is why Zelensky keeps martial law going to prevent anybody from ever having an election, because he couldn't possibly win.
Yeah, obviously he'd be gone. So, hey, on to more mundane things. So the market, you made the call, 62,000 by 2032. We had the tariff disruption, which seems to have run its course. What's next for the market?
Most of them are and gold. You have to understand that there is this problem with war in Europe. And the European governments, the EU, when they were forming it, they came to me. I met with them back in 98. I said, okay, fine. This is how we create a currency. And, Herman Kohl was the chancellor then. So he wouldn't, he knew that the German people would never vote to join the euro. And so he basically took them in without, the people being allowed to vote. And he insisted that there be no consolidation of the debt. And from a trader's perspective, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion of treasuries. When it comes to Europe, I still going to make the same decisions as if the euro didn't exist. Do I want Germany? Do I want France? Do I want Italy? So you can look. I mean, people are just trading all the spreads between them. So all you did was, yes, you created a single currency, but you didn't do that to the bond market. So the problem you have is exemplified basically by 2010 when Greece got into trouble. As soon as that happened, the traders went, great, made a lot of money on that. Who's next? Oh, Spain. And they run over there.
Right.
This is the problem, that because there's no consolidated debt, one country gets into trouble and it's going to create a contagion. And then everybody's going to be looking at, okay, who's next? Oh, look at France. They're well above Maastricht Treaty levels. I suggest reading Herbert Hoover's memoirs. You can get them online, 1931. And he's explaining right there how things happen exactly the same. He said capital acted like on a loose cannon on the deck of a ship in the middle of a tempest. And it all started, one country defaulting, another, Britain defaulted, even Canada defaulted. So, I mean, that's what took down 9,000 banks, not tariffs. But this is the same thing. And what I mean is that Europe needs war because their economic system is collapsing. If you just look at total consumer spending in the world, and this is why the dollar is the reserve currency. Forget gold, all the other nonsense people put out. Out of every dollar a consumer spends in the entire world, 25% is America. All right. Europe, Carney, we'll join with the EU, to hell with the United States. Really? Okay, you better short the hell out of Canada then. The total consumer spending of all of Europe, all right, is $1.29 out of 10. They're overregulated, etc.
13%.
Europe is pathetic. The capitalization of the New York Stock Exchange alone is more than all the exchanges of Europe combined.
Wow.
I mean, people don't realize Europe is, people, the US dollar is going to crash. Really? All right. You're going to see, the US would be the last to fall. All right. A economic decline on a global scale starts in the peripherals. Mm-hmm. So pay attention to Europe. This is also why they're against peace, because if they see this as taking Russia as the only way to come out of this. Right. Schwab's you'll own nothing and be happy. It was all about government defaulting. Mm-hmm. All right. Instead of saying we're going to default, we're going to relieve you of your debt. So we're doing this for you. Because there goes all the pension funds and everything else,
Oh, I believe that one. I got a bridge to sell you in Manhattan,
Right. So you have to understand, Europe is in really desperate shape. It's way overregulated. The German economy is actually shrunk. And I'm not talking about a recession. I'm talking about the number of businesses has declined. All right. First they did the lockdowns with COVID, then the climate change, then the sanctions on Russia. They have no energy. They have to import everything. All right. So this whole thing is just insane. You now have Ursula, who has she hasn't been elected. She is the dictator. Europe has no process to allow people to vote for the head of the EU. Never stands for election. And she's out there because one of the sales points to create the euro was, oh, don't worry, it won't be a dictatorship because it will take 100% consensus. So Hungary's against war. What are they doing now? Okay, well, we'll strip Hungary of the right to vote. So now it becomes a dictatorship.
Yeah.
The 200 billion they stole from Russia, it's Hungary opposes that. It's against international law. So what is she doing? Well, we're changing the definition of what it is.
That works.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like you're sending in troops to Vietnam. Oh, but they're peacekeepers or advisors, you know. Yeah, I mean, it just changed the label, you know. Oh, they're only advisors. You know, here's the coordinates. Push this button, we kill them. You know. Oh, you pushed it, I didn't. You know. This is what goes on. But Europe is in serious trouble.
Hey,
so our markets will go up. All right. All our clients in Europe, all our institutional clients, they've been moving their gold from Europe to America, mainly because when the first bullet is shot, they are going to put on massive capital controls. You're already seeing this in Spain. All right. You need permission now just to take 3,000 euros out. They restrict how much you can get out of an ATM. They're trying to eliminate cash as much as possible. The ECB is moving towards a digital currency and they will cancel all paper currency, period. U.S. cannot do that because it would be unconstitutional. That's why the Fed has said no, because the Fed would need a search warrant to look at your account. They don't need that over there. So they're looking at clamping down on all money. U.S., as I've said before, was bankrupt in 1896. That's when, J.P. Morgan had to lend $100 million in gold. And it was World War I and II that brought all the money here. So after World War II, we had 76% of the world official gold reserves. We became the financial capital of the world after World War I. And these people think a third time is going to be a charm. I'm sorry, our computer does. I've never seen our computer do a forecast on the country that basically says it will not exist, and that's Ukraine.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. So.
Zelensky doesn't give two shits about the people. I don't see him possibly stepping down and retiring there. They'll kill him. And where's he going to go? He doesn't have Biden here. So I guess maybe he's kissing up to Stammer in the UK and Macron.
Trump sure isn't a fan of his.
No, he's going to be, him and his family are going to be dead, period. And what I mean is that if you Italian or Russian mafia, you screw with them, they kill you.
Yeah.
Even the Russian mafia, they're afraid of the worst in the world are Armenian.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back a long way that they kill you, your wife, the kids, and the dog. They don't want anybody coming back to retaliate. And that's what you're getting in the Balkans. This attitude, Yugoslavia broke up, and talk to people in Serbia, and they go, "Oh, those Armenians." This is the way Ukraine is. You talk to any real country that borders them, and they tell you, "Don't do business with a Ukrainian."
Yeah.
They are even the Panama Papers show that they're the most corrupt country in the world.
Yep, we know that. So, Martin, I got a question for you here on a more personal level. Everything you've been through, having your freedom taken away, was it worth it?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it taught me things that I didn't question before. As you know, my father was a lawyer. I grew up with law. I thought there was a rule of law, and then you find out there isn't. It's all bullshit.
Department of Justice, as you call it, right?
Yeah, it's. So people ask me, why aren't you bitter? Because honestly, I wouldn't have known what I know unless I saw it firsthand. I mean, I had to run the law library there, and initially there were a lot of black kids coming in. They looked like they were thugs, but they all kept saying, I was framed. That wasn't my gun.
Yeah.
Initially, I didn't believe them.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a black kid that came in that looked physically like he was retarded. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at his indictment, and it's always the same two cops. Yeah. Now, there are thousands of police in New York. Why is it always these two? And in his case, somebody came forward and said he was frisked 3 times, no gun. They took him back to the wagon. Suddenly,
they found it, huh?
They found the gun.
I heard that before.
So I said, look, I don't recommend people go to trial because you always end up getting more time than a plea deal.
Penalize you for exercising your rights.
And court-appointed lawyers work for the government. They don't work for you.
No.
So I told them, you go to trial. I said, the jury's going to look at you, and I know they're not going to believe the government. So I told him to go, and he won. My court-appointed lawyer said to me, how do you feel that you helped a criminal get out? I said, a criminal? I said, the jury found him innocent. No, they didn't. They just didn't find enough evidence.
Oh, my God.
Told the judge, get this guy out of here. And he was a court-appointed lawyer. Mm-hmm. I never met a single court-appointed lawyer that ever gave 2 shits about people. They just take their orders from the government, period. Mm-hmm. That's why they get appointed. They're part of the club.
You're part of the club and you're not in it. So here's the second question. Would you do anything differently?
Not really. I mean, I survived. I mean, look, they even tried to kill me. I was in a coma for a week. All right, fine. But I came out of it. I'll put it this way. There were a couple things that inspired me. One was Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Mm-hmm. And you begin to see, honestly, if I was sentenced to life in prison, or given the option for death, I choose the death.
Mm-hmm.
Death is not by any means. All these people think, oh, death penalties. It's not the worst. The worst is being thrown into a cell and kept there for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's torture for every day. The other one that inspired me was actually Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
If you read Plato's, Apology, they sentenced him to death. And he said, it's either a migration of the soul to where I will go see all my old friends. Why should I be afraid of such a thing? Or it's like a midsummer night's sleep, so peaceful not to be disturbed by a dream. Go ahead, do your best.
Right.
Those two, and when you're there and you see it, I survived because once you understand the game. Oh, you don't do this, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, go ahead. I'm ready. You take all their power away.
Yeah, it's strictly a question of your fear, but you must have felt like you were living the Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, but I was in civil contempt.
Mm.
So civil contempt, I had no co-defendant, so I could work in the library, and they don't want to pay a lawyer, so they stuck me down there. So I got to see everything, and like I had this one guy come in, and he says, "Oh, they threatened my children and all this stuff," and I said, "Yeah, okay, fine." Then he says, "Oh, you're a cold-hearted bastard." I said, "Let me tell you something. That's standard operational procedure. They do it to everybody. Go talk to people in here and you'll see." He came back and he apologized. He says, "You're right." I said, "Look, this is what they do. They threaten your family.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do what they tell you, they're going to go after your family." Yeah. Michael Milken, he pled. Why? To something was absolutely had nothing to do with insider trading. Total bullshit. I wrote the book on that back in '86, and I have been called in by some of his legal team. Insider trading during the Great Depression was, I knew the company was bankrupt. We're going to announce that on Monday, so I sell all my personal stock on Friday. That's insider trading. Michael Milken was charged, insider trading. Okay, you and I are going to take over a company. And the fraud is, we're defrauding somebody else who doesn't have that information to make the same amount of money. Nobody lost. I mean, it's completely opposite. They flipped it upside down. And this is what they do in court. You look at this prosecutor that went after Trump, and, because he overvalued his property to get
Letitia,
she just is doing the same thing in getting loans out of Virginia on property in New York to get a lower interest. I mean, it's so hypocritical. Everything you do. I mean, just look at this judge they just indicted. All right, she's a county judge. She has no jurisdiction over the question of ICE to begin with. She disagrees with the Trump administration, takes the guy and leads him out of the court through a back door to try and get away from ICE.
Yeah.
She has no jurisdiction on this stuff. Of course, she's doing the same thing as Trump. I'm completely immune from anything I do because I'm a judge. Not true. Sorry. It has to be related. What? So you can kill your spouse and say, I'm a judge, I'm okay. But look, I've seen it all. And there were a bunch of Italian mafia guys. You would not believe the corruption in New York.
Oh, I believe it.
One guy, supposedly this one guy is dead. They don't have a body, nothing. All they have is a car parked at JFK. They prosecute um, three different mafia families in New York. Conspiracy to kill this guy. They don't have a body, no evidence of that whatsoever. And everybody's found guilty. And even the judge with the second one comes up, oh, yeah, I know this case. This is the one we don't know who killed anybody. We don't have a body, right? Yes, Your Honor. 20 years in prison. It's just a joke. One of them, he subpoenaed the tapes, his own tapes of phone calls. They made a mistake and gave him the tapes of the guy who's going to testify against them. Here's the prosecutor on the tape asking him to testify against somebody else. And the guy says, I don't know him. And I listened to this. And the prosecutor said, don't worry. By the time I get done preparing you, you'll know him like it's your brother. It was submitted. And who was the judge? Judge Kaplan. Oh, the same guy that had Trump, him, right? And said, Your Honor, here are the tapes. The same prosecutor with the same guy in my case dismissed. That's another case. That's not this one.
All right.
I mean, terrible.
It is awful, and we appreciate the sacrifice you made for the truth. You know, there aren't many people in this world that would go through what you went through for the truth. Maybe you made some compliance errors. Maybe there were certain things, but certainly the punishment did not fit the crime, and you were basically railroaded, and somehow it's okay. But there are those of us out there who appreciate your sacrifice for the truth, because sometimes you have to give up everything in order to defend the truth. And it's not a pleasant thing to go through. But if people didn't do it, where would we be today, Martin?
Now, look, they had the bankers lied to them to begin with. So the prosecutors, honestly, were just too stupid. They didn't understand what anything was about.
They don't know.
And within 6 months, they had what is called a reverse proffer, where they bring me in and tell me why I should plead guilty, and they're giving me the excuses. And they said, "Look, we know you didn't steal any money." I said, "No shit. How do you get $1 billion out of a bank and nobody knows where it went? It's got to be a wire, you know? Come on. How stupid can you be?" He says he wanted me to plead guilty to a conspiracy with Safra. And I said, do you people understand what the hell you stepped into? I'm not pleading guilty to anything with Safra whatsoever. They were all trying to regime change in Russia. Get out of here. I'm not putting my family at risk because you don't want to admit that you screwed up. And even if you look at my plea, they wrote it. And it says, I don't even think I pled to anything. It says, I failed to tell my clients that the bank took the money for its own benefit. Is that a crime?
Yeah. Well, in modern America, you show me the man, I'll show you the crime. I mean, personally, I think from the time I woke up to the time I got in the shower this morning, I committed 5 felonies, Martin, and I don't even know what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
How many more on the way to Starbucks? So
the rule of law has completely collapsed in this country. It's collapsed even worse in Europe. This is part of what the computer's projecting into 2032. And then the more, I think charging Trump kind of opened the dike to some degree, that people began to see what's going on. They're doing the same to Bolsonaro in Brazil. They went to Le Pen in France, same bullshit. In Romania, I mean, the former president of Pakistan is thrown in prison. They're using this all the time.
Weaponization.
And there's a book I would recommend you can read. It's called On Liberty. by John Stuart Mill.
Mhm.
And he has one of my favorite quotes in there. We have yet to free ourselves of the stain of legal persecution.
Oh my God, that's like sends shivers up your spine because they could just
But when
they did it to you, they could do it to anybody, Martin, and they have.
I was when they did the movie on me, The Forecaster. I think it was Frankfurt. Some woman stood up and says, "Oh, this is what's wrong with American law." And a German lawyer stood up. He said, "What are you talking about? We do this to people here all the time."
Okay. Yeah.
You cannot allow government. And I have been, screaming with people in Capitol Hill that I'd be glad to help with legal reform. The problem is government should not be allowed to bring the charges, period. And because they're, it's political. I saw them rig elections of judges. I saw them. There would be some black kid going to go to trial, and they give him an all black jury, and he thinks it's good. And I said, no, it's not, because they will pick people only from areas that are pissed off at the young guys.
Yeah.
I said, you're better off with a jury that's even white from outside your area,
From
and then they listen objectively.
From the west side of Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I saw them rig courts all the time. If you were Chinese, you got Judge Chin.
Oh God!
I saw one Jewish guy.
He cost me $5 million, Judge Chin.
Yeah,
$5 million.
I saw. I had a Jewish friend. They gave him a Jewish judge who gave him an extra 5 years because he insulted, because they went to the same school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, this is the bullshit that you hear. He was eventually overruled by the Supreme Court and fled the country as soon as he was released. He said, "I'll never come back here again."
OMG, this is horrible. And we could devote a whole show to this. In the meantime, go over to my site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, click the link, buy the book. You'll just see that half of what you hear from people is just illusion. They don't know what they're talking about. We've documented these forecasts. Today is a chilling one, but we'll all have to live with it. Martin's site, armstrongeconomics.com. Any questions or comments, shoot me a link, kl@kerrylutz.com. Martin, again, my sincerest gratitude, and it's been a privilege to put this book together, to interview you over 14 years. I'm looking forward to the next 14.
Well, I hope we have that much time left.